A little girl named Heidi lived in Switzerland. When the story begins, she is 5 years old. Her parents are dead and she has been cared for by her aunt Data, a busy woman who works in a town. One warm summer morning, Aunt Data holds Heidi's hand as they climb a mountain path above the village of Dorfli. "Heidi, you must behave well with your grandfather," says Aunt Data. "Is he kind?" Heidi asks. Aunt Data answers. "People say he is not very friendly. He lives alone high in the Alps. But you will be fine, child." Heidi looks up the green mountainside and smiles. She loves the smell of fresh grass, the bells of the goats and the bright blue sky. Soon they see a small wooden house between pine trees. Smoke rises from its chimney. In front of it sits an old man with a long white beard, carving wood with his knife. His eyes are sharp, but not unkind. "Good morning, Uncle Alp," says Aunt Data. "Here is your granddaughter. You must take care of her now." The old man looks surprised. "My granddaughter? She belongs with you." "I have work in Frankfurt," says Data. "The child will be happier here." Before he can argue, she kisses Heidi quickly and walks away down the path. Heidi watches her go, then turns to the old man. "What's your name, child?" he asks. "Heidi," she says, smiling. "I like your house." The old man looks at her for a long moment, then says, "Come inside." The house is small but clean. There is a bed made of hay, a wooden table, and a little window with a view of the mountains. Heidi claps her hands. "I want to sleep up there in the hay," she says, pointing to a small loft above. Her grandfather laughs for the first time. "As you wish." That evening, they sit outside and eat cheese and bread. The sun goes down behind the snowy peaks, painting the sky orange and pink. The old man gives Heidi a wooden cup of milk from his goat, and she drinks happily. "It tastes like flowers," she says. He smiles quietly. Something in his heart begins to change. The next morning, Heidi wakes early. She hears bells and runs outside barefoot. A boy about 11 years old stands there with a stick and a dozen goats. He smiles at her. "I'm Peter, the goat herd. I take the goats to the pastures every day." "Can I come too?" asks Heidi eagerly. Peter laughs. "If your grandfather says yes." The old man nods. "Go, but stay near Peter." Heidi runs after the goats up the green hill. The grass is soft, the air fresh, and flowers grow everywhere. Yellow, blue and white. She laughs aloud. The mountains seem alive with light. All day she plays with Peter and the goats. They eat bread and cheese together, and Heidi fills her apron with flowers. When they return home, she shows them to her grandfather. "Look, grandfather, they are for you." The old man says nothing, but gently puts the flowers in a wooden bowl. That night, when Heidi is asleep, he sits beside her bed of hay and whispers, "Perhaps God has sent you to me, little one." Every morning, Heidi woke up early to see the sunrise over the Alps. The air was cold and clear, and she loved watching the light slowly touch the snowy peaks. Her days were full of joy. She helped her grandfather with the goats, ran barefoot through the grass, and brought flowers home every evening. She also became good friends with Peter, the goatherd. He was poor but cheerful. He lived with his blind grandmother and his mother, Brigitte, in a small wooden house halfway down the mountain. One day Heidi went there with him. The grandmother sat near the window, her hair white as snow. She could not see, but when Heidi said, "Good afternoon, grandmother," her face lit up with happiness. "Oh, child," said the old woman, touching Heidi's face gently. "I have heard your voice before. Peter told me about you. Sit here with me." Heidi took the old woman's hands. "I'll come often," she said. "I can bring you fresh bread and milk." Tears came to the grandmother's eyes. "You are like sunshine, little one." From that day, Heidi visited her every week. She swept the floor, brought soft bread from her grandfather, and read from the old hymn book, even though she still learned to read slowly. The old woman said her voice was like music. At home, Heidi's grandfather began to change. He laughed more often and built a small stool for her beside his chair. He repaired the fence, painted the house, and even went to church again, something he had not done for many years. People in the village began to speak kindly of him. One afternoon, Aunt Dete suddenly appeared again. She had returned from Frankfurt, dressed in fine clothes. "Well, Heidi," she said with a smile, "how big you've grown. You must come with me now." Heidi looked at her, surprised. "Why? I like it here." Dete explained. "There is a rich family in Frankfurt. They have a girl who cannot walk. They want a companion for her. You will live in a big house and wear nice clothes. You will be happy." Heidi shook her head. "I don't want to go. I want to stay with grandfather and the goats and Peter." The old man stood behind her, his eyes dark. "She stays here," he said firmly. But Aunt Dete smiled politely. "You can't stop me, Uncle. You're not her legal guardian. I have work for her, a good place." Before the old man could answer, she took Heidi's hand and led her quickly down the path. Heidi turned back and cried, "Goodbye, grandfather. I'll come back soon." The old man stood silently, his heart heavy. The next morning, the mountains seemed empty without her laughter. Meanwhile, Heidi and Aunt Dete travelled down the mountain, across the valley, and then by train to Frankfurt. Heidi had never seen so many people or such flat land. She pressed her face against the window and whispered, "Where are the mountains?" Aunt Dictator only said, "Far away now." When they arrived in the city, the air smelled strange, of smoke and horses and dust. The houses were tall and grey. Heidi felt small and lost. Finally, they reached a large house with stone steps and shiny windows. A serious woman opened the door. She was tall, with a long dress and a strict face. "I am Miss Rottenmeier," she said coldly. "You must behave well here. The master's daughter is delicate and cannot walk. You are to be her companion." Heidi nodded shyly. Miss Rottenmeier looked at her bare head and simple dress. "We will need to change this at once," she said. Soon Heidi met Clara, a kind girl in a wheelchair. Clara smiled warmly. "You must be Heidi. I'm so happy you're here." Heidi relaxed a little. "Your house is big," she said, "but there are no goats." Clara laughed. "No, only books and my piano. You can tell me about your mountains." From that day, the two girls became friends. Heidi told Clara stories about the high meadows, the bells of the goats, and the smell of wildflowers. Clara listened with shining eyes. But Miss Rottenmeier was not pleased. She thought Heidi was strange and too simple. "This child is uncivilized," she said to the housekeeper. "She talks about goats and sleeps with windows open. She must learn proper manners." So Heidi had to wear tight shoes and long dresses and sit still for lessons. But when she looked out the window and saw no hills, no grass, no sky, she felt sad. Sometimes at night she cried softly. Still, she smiled for Clara and tried to be brave. She brought her flowers from the market and told her about the songs of the wind in the pines. Clara said, "I wish I could see your mountains." "You will," said Heidi. "One day you will come with me." But deep inside, Heidi began to grow homesick. She dreamed of the Alps, the goats, the sunshine, and her grandfather's voice calling her name. Weeks passed in Frankfurt, and life in the big house followed the same pattern every day. Heidi helped Clara with her lessons, read aloud from books, and walked beside her wheelchair in the garden. She was kind and cheerful, and Clara's father, Mr. Zayzeman, liked her very much. But Miss Rottenmeier continued to complain. "This child does not behave like a young lady," she said. "She forgets to curtsy, and she talks about mountains and goats as if they were people." Mr. Zayzeman only smiled. "Let her be, Miss Rottenmeier. She brings sunshine into this house." Clara agreed. She was happier than ever before. She laughed more, ate better, and even started to practice standing with help. "Heidi gives me strength," she told her father. But Heidi herself grew quieter. She tried to hide it, but she missed her home deeply. Every night when the city was dark and silent, she looked out the window toward the north and whispered, "Grandfather, can you hear me?" She dreamed of the green meadows, the ringing of goat bells, and the blue sky above the mountains. In Frankfurt, the air was heavy. She could not see the stars. Slowly, her smile began to fade. One evening, Heidi took a candle and went to the tall window in the hallway. She opened it and looked out. The air was cool, and for a moment she imagined she could smell the mountain wind. "I want to go home," she whispered. Miss Rottenmeier found her and was shocked. "Child, what are you doing out of bed? You'll catch a cold. Go to your room at once." After that, Miss Rottenmeier kept the doors locked at night. But Heidi's homesickness only grew worse. She stopped eating and grew pale and thin. During the day she tried to read to Clara, but her voice trembled. Sometimes she would stand silently at the window for hours. Mr. Sesemann noticed the change. "Heidi," he said kindly, "are you unhappy here?" Heidi looked down and nodded. "I like Clara, but I miss my grandfather in the mountains. I can't breathe here. The sky is too small." The doctor came to see her, an old man with gentle eyes. After speaking with her for a while, he turned to Mr. Sesemann and said, "She is homesick. If she stays here, she will become seriously ill. She must go back to her mountains." Miss Rottenmeier protested. "That is ridiculous. We can't send her away." But the doctor said firmly, "No walls can cure a heart that needs open air." Mr. Sesemann understood. "Prepare for the journey," he said. "We'll send her home tomorrow." When Heidi heard the news, she cried. Not from sadness, but from joy. "I will see grandfather again, and Peter, and the goats, and the flowers." Clara smiled, though her eyes were wet. "I'll miss you, Heidi. You are my best friend." "I'll write to you," said Heidi, "and you must come to visit me in the Alps." The next morning, Aunt Data came to take her home. Mr. Sesemann gave Heidi a small basket filled with gifts for her grandfather and grandmother. Clara hugged her tightly. "Don't forget me," she whispered. "I never will," said Heidi. The journey back to Switzerland was long but happy. Heidi pressed her face to the train window and watched as the mountains appeared again in the distance. Her heart beat faster with every mile. The air became fresher, the sky bluer, and soon she could hear the sound of cowbells again. At last they reached the village of Dorfli. Aunt Data walked with her to the foot of the mountain. "There, child," she said. "Now you can climb the rest of the way yourself." Heidi thanked her and began to run up the familiar path. Her feet knew every stone. The higher she went, the lighter she felt. At the top, she saw the little wooden house among the pines. Smoke rose from the chimney. The door opened and her grandfather stepped out. "Heidi!" he shouted. "Grandfather!" she cried, running into his arms. For a long time, they said nothing. The old man's eyes were wet. "My little one," he said softly, "you are home again." That evening, they sat outside watching the sunset. The air smelled of grass and pine. Peter came running up with the goats. When he saw Heidi, his face broke into a huge grin. "You're back," he said. "Grandmother will be so happy." Heidi laughed and said, "Then let's go see her tomorrow." That night, she slept again in her bed of hay, under the window that looked out to the stars. She whispered a prayer of thanks before closing her eyes. The sound of the wind in the trees was like a lullaby, and soon she was fast asleep. Home at last. The next morning, the mountains were bright and full of sunlight. The grass shone with dew, and bells rang softly from the goats climbing higher on the hills. Heidi was awake early, full of joy. She ran down the path to Peter's house. When the grandmother heard her voice, she lifted her hands in wonder. "Is it you, child? My dear little Heidi?" "Yes, grandmother, I'm back for good," Heidi said, holding her hands. Tears ran down the old woman's cheeks. "Now I can die happy," she whispered. Heidi laughed. "Oh no, grandmother, you must live a long time yet. I'll come every day, and I'll bring soft white bread for you from Dorfli." The grandmother smiled. "You bring more than bread, my dear. You bring sunshine." Heidi kept her promise. Each morning she visited the old woman, read to her from the hymn book, and described the colour of the sky and the flowers. Peter watched her quietly. Sometimes he helped her carry wood or water. Deep in his heart, he was glad that she was home again. Meanwhile, Heidi's grandfather had changed completely. He often went to the village to sell cheese and to greet the people he once avoided. Everyone noticed how different he was. "The arm uncle has a good heart after all," they said. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Frankfurt. It was from Clara. It said, "My dearest Heidi, I miss you very much. The mountains you spoke of are always in my dreams. My father says that if the doctor agrees, We will come to visit you this summer. With love, Clara. Heidi ran to show it to her grandfather. His eyes twinkled. Then we must get ready. Our little house will welcome guests. The summer came, full of bright skies and wildflowers. One morning, a fine carriage climbed the mountain road. Inside sat Mr. Sesemann, Clara, and the doctor. Peter led the goats away, looking shy, while Heidi waited excitedly by the house. When the carriage stopped, Clara smiled from the window. "Heidi, I'm here!" Heidi ran to her and hugged her tightly. "Welcome to the mountains, Clara. You will love it here." The air was fresh and the sun warm. The doctor helped Clara out of the carriage and into her wheelchair. Her eyes widened as she looked around. "It's even more beautiful than you said." For the next few days, Clara rested and breathed the mountain air. She ate fresh milk and cheese, and her cheeks became pink. Heidi showed her everything: the pastures, the goats, the waterfall, and the wildflowers. One morning, Heidi said, "Clara, today you must try to walk. The grass is soft and Peter and I will help you." Clara looked frightened but hopeful. The doctor nodded. "Yes, my dear, try. You are stronger now." Heidi took her hands. Just one step. Clara pressed her feet to the ground. Her legs trembled. Then she took a small step and another. She gasped in surprise. "I'm walking!" she cried. Heidi laughed and clapped her hands. "You did it! You really did it!" Peter, watching from behind the goats, whispered softly, "She can walk. She really can." Tears came to Grandfather's eyes. He lifted his hands and said quietly, "Thank God." That evening, the sunset was golden over the peaks. The whole valley glowed in the warm light. Clara stood beside Heidi, holding her arm for balance. The two girls watched the colours in silence. "I will never forget this day," said Clara. "It feels like a miracle." "It is," said Heidi. "The mountains make everything alive again." When Mr. Sesemann saw his daughter walking, he could hardly speak. He shook Grandfather's hand and said, "You have given me my child back." Grandfather smiled. It was the mountain that healed her. And perhaps a little sunshine from Heidi. The visitors stayed for many happy weeks. Clara grew stronger each day. She and Heidi picked flowers, sang songs with Peter, and laughed from morning until night. When it was time to go home, Clara hugged Heidi and whispered, "I will come back next summer." After the carriage disappeared down the road, the mountain was quiet again. Heidi stood beside her grandfather, looking at the wide blue sky. "Grandfather," she said softly, "isn't God good?" He nodded. "Yes, child. He is good to those who keep love in their hearts." Heidi smiled. "Then I will always try to keep it." The wind blew gently through the pine trees, carrying the sound of goat bells from far away. Heidi looked up at the shining peaks and felt full of peace. She was home, surrounded by everything and everyone she loved. And so, the little girl from the mountains brought joy wherever she went, in the city, in the village, and above all, in the heart of her grandfather.